Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Emma and this channel is all about sewing, mainly hand sewing, and today's video is a Q&A video and also a little catch up of what I've been making recently and things that I've got coming up. So thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope that you'll enjoy it. So I asked on Instagram, on Patreon and here on YouTube for questions for the Q&A, and thank you so much if you left me a question. I'm going to do my best to cover as many as possible. There were quite a lot, so that's really great. So let's get started. So I'll start with the questions that are on Patreon. So Anne asked, she said she often struggles organising time to stitch and then deciding which project to work on. It's like trying to choose a kitten. Yeah, I understand that. Do you have any suggestions or practices to help? Well, I don't know if this advice I'm going to give is going to help, but one thing that's helped me is trying not to battle against who I am. So I see other people online who are quite dedicated to one project, and I love seeing that progress, and I wish that I had the focus to just stick to one long-term project and see it through and get to the end result faster. And for years I've battled with that with myself, and it almost feels like a constant struggle, like being at war with myself. And in recent years I've just learned to accept that that's who I am, that I don't just focus on one thing and see it through to the end. I have to switch between different projects. I like the variation, and although I might sometimes feel frustrated that I've not progressed enough with one thing, I accept that about myself, and so I try not to beat myself up about being somebody who flits from project to project. So when it comes to deciding which one to work on, I just go for the one that I feel like working on rather than something that I should work on, because that feels better and I feel more creative when I'm working on something like that. And in terms of organising my time, I just try to be realistic with what time I've got. I prioritise what I feel like working on. So at the moment I'm working on a crochet blanket, and I'll just have that set up and ready at home so I can pick it up and put it down whenever I want to. I think having the project ready, having everything that you need to hand is really helpful, so that you can pick up things and put them down when you've only got small amounts of time. Taking something with you, having it in the car, even if you don't end up working on it, you've got it there. I like doing that. So I try to be organised in having everything together in a bag or a sewing box or something, and yeah, just go with what I feel like. So I don't know if that's really helped you, Anne, but hopefully it has a little bit. So Emma asked, I know your grandmother was a great source of inspiration for you. Could you tell us a little bit about her and what her favourite projects were? Did she sew for necessity or for the joy of it? Also, could you please consider doing another room tour or sewing box tour? I do so love to see all your pretty things. Yes, I will definitely do a sewing room and sewing box tour. I'll do another video about that later this year for definite, so thank you for that suggestion. Please always send suggestions for videos that you want to see. It really helps me. I always have ideas, but I love getting more ideas. You know, we all get stuck sometimes for thinking of things to do, so please always send suggestions. I'll definitely do that. Yeah, so my gran, she did a lot of knitting and crochet in my lifetime. That's what I remember her doing the most, really. She lived through the Second World War, and she told me about only being able to buy small amounts of crochet cotton at a time. And I remember she would go and buy one ball of wool at a time, knit it up as fast as she could, and then go back to the shop to buy the next one. So she did more knitting and crochet, I would say, than sewing. I'm sure she did make garments, but I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Embroidery, she absolutely loved embroidery, and she did that when she was young. So she didn't really sew for necessity. I suppose the knitting was out of necessity as well as for the joy of it, because you couldn't buy that many clothes at that time. And she also came from a very poor background, which they didn't have any money. She was the youngest of 8 children, and yeah, they just didn't have any money to buy things. So any possession that she had, she absolutely treasured and kept her entire life. So with her embroidery, she did it when she was young, but in her adult life, in her later adult years, she didn't do much embroidery. She wanted to have a room set up for it, and she just never really got there with organising her house. Never got it to be the way she wanted it to be for sitting down comfortably and doing her embroidery. And yeah, we tried to help her as much as we could, but that's a long story. But I think the moral of the story is, don't wait for the perfect time to do something, just go for it no matter what the situation is, because it's a shame that she didn't get to spend more time on that. Emma also asked, which are your favourite threads and why? I sell the Wonderful threads, not all of them, they have a huge range, and the reason why those are the ones that I put for sale in my online shop is because they're the ones I use and they're the ones that I absolutely love. So I love Invisifil for hand sewing, and also Deco Bob, which is just slightly thicker. I use those for EPP. I love the range of Fruity variegated thread, which is a 12 weight thread. It's lovely to do hand quilting with that. So yeah, they're the threads that I use day in, day out really, and they're the ones that I really, really love. So Laura asked, is there a Hexiform hack? I find them too flimsy to glue my fabric with precision. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that you're having some trouble with that, Laura. I think the main hack really for Hexiform is just practice. It takes a bit of getting used to. Hexiform did change. It used to be slightly stiffer, but they changed what they made it out of, and they had to make it softer, which has its pros and cons. The end product is softer, which is a good thing, but it can be a little bit trickier to use. But I would just say, just take your time, work with a finer fabric. So if you've got some Liberty Tonal Lawn, that is a thinner fabric, and it makes it easier to feel the edge of the Hexiform as you're folding your seam allowance over. But yeah, I would just say persevere with it. Try hexagons, because they're an easier shape than triangles, for example, and because they haven't, or diamonds, because you haven't got the points to mess around with. Try some 1-inch hexagons. They're a really good size. Baste a load of them and start stitching them together, and just use your glue sparingly. Cut your seam allowances a little bit on the larger side, so just a bit bigger than 1/4 of an inch, and just fold it over gently, feeling for the edge of the Hexiform as you do so. I hope those tips help. If I think of anything else, I'll let you know. So Brianna asked me a few questions. Can you demonstrate close up how you start and finish your thread? I'll make a short form video about that, so it'll be really clear. So I can definitely do that. So look out for that on Instagram or the shorts on YouTube. How do you take care of your hands? Do you do any stretches? No, not really. I don't have a routine of stretches, but I do feel the pain at times. It's usually the tips of my fingers with just gripping the needles tight and things like that. So I just take a break really and do another task. If I'm working on a big project, it's good to sort of break up the sewing and the basting. So when you need a break from basting and you've got gluey fingers and you're just fed up with that, do the sewing part and then switch back to basting to give your fingers a rest. And yeah, just do what feels natural. So if you feel like you need to stretch out your hands and have a break, always do that. That's really important. How do you store your beeswax during the heat? Well, we don't really have super hot, humid weather here, so it's never really been a problem. My beeswax is just in a drawer, so I've never known of beeswax or anything to be melted just because it's warm here. So sorry, I can't really help with that. Yeah, we just don't have a warm climate here at all. And Melissa asked, I live in the USA and wondered if you find it necessary to use any thread conditioners such as Thread Heaven beeswax on your polyester threads prior to hand stitching. So actually, I don't use any thread conditioner with polyester threads at all. I've never felt the need to. The polyester threads are super strong and they glide through the fabric really easily, and so I don't use them for that. The only time that I use something like a beeswax, or more often than not, I use the Thread Magic rather than the beeswax, is on embroidery thread. So if you've got embroidery thread that's been wound onto a bobbin rather than kept in a skein, or you just find that the plies of the thread, because it's stranded, are not sticking together properly, running it through some Thread Magic, which is the same as Thread Heaven, I think, or using a bit of beeswax just helps to keep everything smooth and helps it to stop tangling. So that's the only time I would use that, really. And I don't use beeswax really because it actually dulls the sheen on the threads and dulls the colour a little bit, so I tend to use the Thread Magic. So today's video has very kindly been sponsored by Serious Readers, and here I have my high definition light from Serious Readers that I've been using here in the studio. It's a really great light because it's actually cordless, which means I can pick it up and move it to any part of the studio that I like. Now today is a pretty sunny day, so I'm going to cut to some footage of a few days ago when I was working in here in the evening, and because I've been working a lot of hours recently, doing some hand stitching, getting things prepared, and you can see just how well it works. It uses something called daylight wavelength technology, and what that does is replicate the daylight spectrum as closely as technically possible, and that means that it creates such a lovely light to stitch under. It feels really natural and it really helps to reduce eye strain. The Serious lights are also really high quality. They have a 2-year guarantee, and this one charges up and the battery life lasts for 7 hours, and it only takes a couple of hours to charge, and you can brighten and dim the light as well. So that's it on its dimmest and that's it on its brightest, and even though it is daytime, you can still see just how bright the light is even in daytime. So it really does work so well, and I really recommend these lights. If you're interested in finding out more about the Serious Lights range, there is a link in the description box below, and you can use the offer code EMMA24 for £100 off a high definition light and free delivery. Serious Readers are also hosting a fantastic competition this summer, so have a look in the description box below and there is information where you can enter, and there are some fantastic prizes. Thank you so much to Serious Readers for sponsoring today's video. Right, we're on to some other questions from Instagram. What size needles are you using for your projects? So I tend to use a size 9 or 10 milliner's needle for the EPP, for the whip stitch. I tend to use a size 8 or 9 embroidery needle for fine embroidery details. And I tend to use a size 24 chenille needle if I am doing some big stitch hand quilting or bigger, more decorative embroidery. I use the size 10 applique needle when I'm doing applique. Trying to think what else. I like the pony certain stitch needles, and I use the betweens a lot for big stitch hand quilting. Pamela asked, do you have any other hobbies? Yes, I love hobbies and I have a lot of them. So I absolutely love most crafts. I love crochet. I've dabbled with knitting in the past. I love making things. I've done dressmaking in the past and like making things for my little boy, toy making. I love reading. particularly classics and children's classics I love, or historical fiction. So yeah, I really love that. I love gardening and being outdoors and anything to do with nature, so walking, visiting nature reserves, learning about plants and animals, and visiting gardens and trying to do my garden myself, growing things from seed like vegetables and flowers. I love doing all of that. So yeah, plenty of hobbies. Any books you'd recommend for a complete newbie to EPP? Yes, so I would recommend Flossie Tea Cake's Guide to English Paper Piecing. Fantastic book. Doesn't really have a lot of patterns in it. It has a couple at the back, but that's not the purpose of the book. The book is full of information about English paper piecing. It also has interviews with really inspiring makers, designers, and it has all of the details for the basics of English paper piecing that you'll need to get started. So that's a really good one. Maria asked, I want to make a Christmas quilt for my 8-year-old granddaughter. So I haven't made a Christmas quilt as such, and this isn't an English paper piecing design, but the best book that I can think of for Christmas designs, quilting designs, is Laurie Holt's book. I think it's called Vintage Christmas. I have the book at home. I've made some of the blocks. I made a Christmas tree block from it and made it into a cushion for my little boy. And I also made the train block. That, I think it's called Vintage Christmas. I'll put a picture of it up on the screen so you can see. 10 out of 10 recommend that book. That's really, really good. The designs are just amazing and you'll have a lot of fun with that one. And it's great for kids' quilts. Lynn asked, what is the best way to follow all you do? I am new to this. Definitely follow over on Instagram. I try and share as much as possible on a daily basis over there. But if you're looking for updates of when new things will be released, then my newsletter is a great place to follow along. I send out 1, sometimes 2 newsletters a month, and you can find the form to sign up to my newsletter at the bottom of the homepage of my website. So just go to my website, the link is in the description box below, and click on that and scroll to the bottom and you'll find the sign up page and you'll find the sign up form for my newsletter. Where do you get your inspiration from? So inspiration is a really interesting one. Sometimes it's as simple as just seeing some fabric that I absolutely love and it really inspires me to create something with it. But sometimes I'll see vintage and antique quilts or sewing items from the past. That always is really inspiring to me. But more often than not, it's actually things that are completely not related to sewing that inspires me. So being outdoors in the countryside where I live, being amongst nature, seeing greenery, flowers, butterflies, just fills me up. I learned about 10 years ago that is the thing that really calms me, makes me feel better, animals and nature. And so that makes me feel good, and in turn that makes me feel creative. And so that's what then inspires me, that I want to create something with some floral fabric, or like with the flower quilts, I want to bring that into what I'm creating. So yeah, that's either old-fashioned things from the past or nature. Ideas for storing items, unusual small sewing projects, adding EPP to clothing. Thank you, Anne. There's some super ideas there. So most of my patterns are actually small sewing items that are perfect for storing projects in. Let me show you. So of course you can use plastic boxes with compartments in, or sewing boxes that you can buy to store things, but if you're looking for ways to store projects and also small sewing projects to do, then you can do two things in one with a lot of these patterns. So we've got my hexagon storage basket. This is the smaller version, but there's a big version that comes with the pattern as well. There's things like the blossom carry case, so that's perfect for carrying projects around, but also these are small manageable projects that you can make over the course of a few evenings. We've got the Cozy Cottage notion pouch, great for storing your needles and reels of cotton, but then we've also got the large version which opens out, and it's got zip compartments and open compartments, so you can take your project on the go inside. And of course the pattern that started it all, which is the hexagon sewing case. Then there's the little hexagon needle book. So I hope that helps Anne when asking about small sewing projects, unusual small sewing projects. I haven't done much adding EPP to clothing, but yeah, maybe in the future. Before we carry on, I do apologise if you can hear some noise outside. I have the windows open, but yeah, it's a bit noisy outside, but it's a warm day. So Louise Loves Crafts asked, which pony needle is best for hand quilting? Could you briefly show how to stitch with them? Thank you. Yes, I like the Betweens needle for big stitch hand quilting. You'd need to choose one of the smaller ones, so probably the Sharps needle for more detailed hand quilting. But I'll do a short form video about that as well, where I'll show it in detail, so look out for that in the shorts on YouTube in the coming weeks, or over on Instagram. Sewing Day Designs asked me, I'd love to know what are the pros and cons of the various templates. Is one better? So I'm not sure what you mean about templates. I don't use the acrylic plastic templates that much, just because I like to try to save money, and I don't want to always be suggesting people to buy different things. So I don't know if you mean about those. As far as I'm aware, they're all the same, really. They're just an acrylic template that you can cut around. I wouldn't know that one would be better than the other. If you mean paper templates that you use inside, your paper shapes, I've only ever used ones from Paper Pieces and from Sew and Quilt, and also Tales of Cloth. And I really like the ones from Sew and Quilt because they are white and they're a great thickness. So I would recommend paper templates and shapes from Sew and Quilt. So Lisa Arnold asked, buying my first sewing machine, any suggestions for brand and functions? Oh, that's very exciting, Lisa. So obviously when it comes to buying a sewing machine, budget probably is going to be the first thing that you need to think about, how much you're going to spend. So I don't know your budget, but I would, in my experience, which is limited, I've had quite a few sewing machines over the years, and I've had computerized machines and mechanical machines, and I personally prefer using a mechanical machine, and I love my Juki machine. I have a video about that, and it also compares it to the Pfaff computerized machine I have. I'll leave a link to that video down below. So you need to think about your budget, but think about the functionality of the machine and what you're going to use it for. If you're doing general sewing and quilting and things like that, do you need a machine that has like 500 decorative stitches? No, I'm not sure anybody really needs that. Are you going to be hemming clothing and things like that? If you are, you're going to want something that has a zigzag, so don't go for a straight stitch only machine. Look for the machines that have lots of metal parts rather than plastic parts. Look for the ones that say they're metal inside, they're stronger and more durable. Look for a powerful motor. So I would focus on those things, and maybe what accessories it comes with. So does it come with a walking foot if you want to do quilting on it? Does it come with an open toe applique foot? That sort of thing. I would focus on those rather than number of decorative stitches, because I think most people find they don't use those. one function that I don't think I could live without, and I would never buy a machine without if I had to buy another machine, would be the automatic thread cutter. So I have that on my Juki machine. I don't have that on my Pfaff machine, and I love that function. So yeah, that's really handy if you're doing a lot of patchwork. So budget, think about exactly what you want to use that machine for, and then look for something that's really well built and sturdy. So I recommend Pfaff and I recommend Juki machines. Hope that helps a little bit. It's very exciting that you're buying your first machine, so good luck. So lots of people asking me, how is the studio working out, which thank you for asking. It's working out really, really well. I love being in this space. It's nice having that separation from home. It obviously comes with a bit of stress because it is a cost, an extra cost. It's an overhead that I didn't have before. So yeah, it comes with a bit of pressure, but I feel like I'm coping really well with it and I'm really happy here. Yeah, I love being here and I feel positive about the future, and everything's great about the room and the facilities, and I have no negatives at all. It was a good decision. Okay, so I'm on to some of the questions from YouTube now. So TK3025 asked, I'm curious to know your sewing background, self-taught art background. Who were your role models in creativity? Well, that's a really great question. So I'm completely self-taught. I didn't do an art degree or any art courses apart from a GCSE in art, which I absolutely loved. And I did, when I was choosing colleges, I did go and look around 2 colleges. I looked at the art course at one college and I looked at the fashion design course at the other college. But I talked myself out of those courses because I thought, well, I'm not very good at drawing, and what job can you get using those anyway? That was the mentality I had in the late 90s about art, and I think it's just because opportunities were different then and people viewed art differently then than they do now. So I wasn't discouraged from doing those courses. My parents would have supported me doing anything, but yeah, I just took what I thought was a more sensible option, and I ended up studying languages and did a degree in languages and a master's degree in translation. So completely unrelated, but all throughout my life and throughout being a teacher and everything that I've done, craft, sewing, making, creating has been always part of my life. And I started when I was 5 years old, and I remember exactly the first thing that I made and from a craft kit, and I have a special video about that in the works for the future. But yeah, I taught myself from books, taught myself to crochet from books. My gran bought me some books when I was around the age of 18 for jewellery making and knitting and crochet. And yeah, I've just always either learnt from people around me or from books and then eventually the internet. My role models in creativity were definitely my parents and my gran. So we've talked about my gran before. You've met my mum and dad. They're really creative people. I grew up in a household full of music and storytelling and making things. So yeah, that's just always been part of my life. Craft Dipper. Hi, Craft Dipper. So Craft Dipper asks, I have 2 questions. What is your favourite part about working in your new studio? What is your favourite quilt you've made so far and why? Oh, great questions. I think my favourite part about being in the studio is definitely how light and bright it is and having so much space. So those things, it's lovely to have so much space, and eventually I know it's going to be having other people here as well for classes. I know I'm going to love that. And my favourite quilt I've made so far and why? I think it's the penguin quilt I made for my son last year for his 7th birthday. I think I put it off for a while because I thought I couldn't do it. I thought it was going to be too hard. It turned out really well. Not perfect, but yeah, I loved making that for him. And it's about that. It's about that I made it for him. That's what makes it really special. Tracy says, I'm falling in love with, and I've really struggled to say this, Acufactum fabric. So that's the company that make the fabrics designed by Daniela Drescher, and I've used them in my Happy Memories quilt. And she says, I've fallen in love with those fabrics. I've seen a little bit in your Quilt As You Go Hexie project. Would love to know what you think of it and how you found to work with it. Yeah, I really like that fabric. It doesn't feel as soft as regular quilting cotton. It is a little bit stiffer, but the designs on them are just so beautiful and so charming that I can totally see past that. It might not be as soft as like a Liberty quilting cotton, for example. Blessed Mama Life, how do you go about getting fabric? Do you purchase with a pattern picked out or just buy what you like? So the sensible answer should be always purchase with a pattern in mind, because that way you're not just going to build a stash of things that you don't know what to do with. That's absolutely not what I do. And I don't think many of us do we? We see a fabric that we really love and think, I've just got to buy that and I'll use it for something one day. So the drawback to that is you end up accumulating quite a lot of fabric that you don't know what to do with, or that you find hard to cut into because they're so precious. But yeah, that's what I do most of the time. I don't usually have a pattern in mind first and then buy the fabric. Debbie Flaxman, hi Emma, I'd like to know if you have any tips on choosing colours to go together for projects. I struggle to decide on what to use, so don't start. I totally understand that, and I actually think choosing colours is one of the most difficult parts of creating a quilt. And the thing that really helped me was working within a certain colour palette. So as you know, I tend to choose pastel colours, lots of shades of pink, pale green and blue, and they tend to coordinate and work together because they're all in the same tone. So I think, you know, if you have in your mind a bit of a colour palette first, so if you like really bright jewel tones, so go onto Pinterest, type in bright jewel tone colour palette, and you'll see there'll be boards on Pinterest that have colours together, and you'll start to see, oh, the teal looks really good with the fuchsia pink, and build it from outwards like that, and choose I would say 5 main colours that you want in your quilt, perhaps. I mean, it depends on the design, but you know, 4 or 5 colours that are your main ones, and then you want some blenders to go in with that. I hope that helps. It is difficult, but Pinterest is a great tool for colour palettes. Even if you just type into Pinterest colour palette, you get really lovely ideas. You get photographs in which somebody has pulled out the colours from the photograph that all go together, how to choose colour combinations, and there's an endless amount on there. So I think that's a really good place to start, by having a look on Pinterest. Another thing you can do, if you just happen to be next to like a DIY store that has the paint swatches, then you can go in and choose some of them, put them together and see which ones you like. So create your own colour palette, but use the swatches on the cards that they give away for free in the DIY shop. No one has to know that you're not choosing paint, that you're going to use it for fabric. So yeah, hope that helps. So Craft Gal asks, I'd like to hear more about your plans for classes. After hearing about them in your studio tour, I'd love to know more. Oh, thank you. Yes, so I'm planning to hold 1 to 2 classes a month, in-person classes. The classes will always be really small, with a maximum of 6 people, because it isn't a huge space, so that will be comfortable and also mean that I can give everybody as much attention as they need. The classes will typically be on Saturdays, just because that will fit in better with childcare and things like that for me. But you never know, that can always change. There's information on my website about the classes that are available now, so there's still 2 places left for the August beginners embroidery class, and there are, I think, 4 or 5 places left on the October Create Your Own Hexagon mini quilt class. The September one sold out really quickly, so thank you to everybody who's coming to that. I'm looking forward to that so much, looking forward to all of the classes. There'll be some food as well when you come, and you'll be sent a menu ahead of time, and you can let me know your preferences and things, and I'll be providing some food. And I will also be doing virtual classes online for people who can't come to the studio, and if the subject matter is the same as the in-person classes, then if you come to an in-person class, included in that will be any online content, so you've got reference materials to go back to. And yeah, that's the plan so far. There might be some Christmas classes later in the year, towards Christmas maybe, and so far they're just going to be standalone classes, just 6-hour classes. I haven't planned any that are going to be weekly classes yet, because I think I need to gauge where people are and where people are travelling from. Because really, if it was a weekly thing, you'd have to be quite local. If it was like 2 hours every Thursday night or something like that. So at the moment, it's just the standalone classes. And yeah, so if you want to find out more, there's details on my website. It tells you everything. So Sue asked, how is your Barton Cottage quilt coming along? You do know that you were the person that made me buy the kit. Will you be filming that on your channel anytime soon? I'm sorry, Sue, that I am responsible for that. I haven't touched it, and it has been sat on the shelf in my sewing room at home. I want to make it so badly, but one of the things that I tend to do when I have something special like that kit is just leave it and look at it and treasure it, not actually work on it. But I have been thinking in my head, when I work on that, I'll make a cozy sewing vlog of me working on it. So it won't be a tutorial, because it's not my pattern, and I never want to put out a tutorial for someone else's pattern. That doesn't feel right. But I'll make maybe a cozy sewing vlog when I do work on that, and yeah, I'll definitely share it on YouTube. So yeah. Oh, and also I may have bought the next kit that comes, so once that arrives, which I think is the Mansfield Park one, I think that's what it is. I pre-ordered it so long ago I've forgotten, so it'll be a nice surprise. But when that comes, I'll definitely be wanting to make the Mansfield Park, the Barton Cottage one, so that I can get to the other one. Does that make sense? So Charlie Sparkle asked, how is your father doing? Has he gone further with quilting? Yeah, he's doing really well. He has been a bit poorly, so he hasn't been able to come back on the channel, but before he got poorly, he was flying with his quilting. Let me show you what he made. All by himself, he made this quilt, which is a disappearing 9-patch quilt. And he did it by himself. He found a tutorial on YouTube, showed me it. He was really excited about it. We gathered some fabrics that are all in a seaside boat water type theme. I started to film the process, but he just made it so... we went to the shops and we bought these, and he just made it so quickly. Yeah, there was no stopping him. So it's got boats on the back, and he did the binding himself, and look how amazing it is, like all stitched down by hand on the back. It's so good. So hopefully when he's better he'll get back to sewing, as he has been a bit poorly, but yeah, there was no stopping him. He also had this great idea for making patchwork boats in this origami style. It was really unique. I hope he's going to get back to that, because I'd love to share that with you. It was I've never seen anything like it or heard of anything like it, so yeah, it was quite exciting. So that seems to be all of the questions. Sorry if this has been a bit of a long video. Thank you to everyone who participated by sending me a question. If you ever have anything you want to know about, I did forget, I had a couple of questions about thimbles. I'm going to make a whole dedicated video about thimbles. Yeah, so I've had a lot of questions about thimbles actually lately. But if there's ever anything you want to know, always leave me a comment somewhere. I'll see it. I prioritise my comments. I try to reply to everybody as quickly as I can. If you ever have any suggestions for video ideas, things you want to see, let me know, and yeah, I'll try to do that. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you really soon with another video. Take care. Bye bye.